So what I'm going to give you is a brief overview of my perspective of creativity. And the reality is that it's not right, it's not wrong, I want you to start to think of looking at creativity in a somewhat different framework, and then try to bring more creativity in your life. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do, and we're going to be quiet for 5 minutes, I want you to think of a hypothesis that has never been thought of before. Ready? Begin.
First astronaut will...
No. I've given you all the instructions I'm going to give you. Okay, I want you to think of a hypothesis that has never been thought of before.
By the world or by me?
No, that's it. Yeah, I've given you all the instructions necessary.
So you want to tell us?
No. Quiet, just think. Okay, why don't we stop? Now, how easy was that?
Extremely easy.
What?
Extremely easy.
Okay.
Just Polish people.
Well, in some ways it's very easy if you think of the idea quickly. In some ways, in some areas it's not easy because you can't think of something. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the nature of creativity, is basically, and creativity can be extremely difficult, basically trying to be creative. And sometimes it's very, very easy in terms of developing it. Now, as Shelka said, what we're going to be able to do is at the end of the program today, I'm going to give you 10 minutes. And what I want you to do is to write out the most creative hypothesis that you can do. Then what we're going to do is we're going to have those typed up, and then we're going to have a peer review tomorrow morning on those, where you are going to rate and identify the top rated creative ideas. And then we brought to you some very nice, incredibly nice, I think about, Jen, aren't they about $1,000 each are gifts for people? Okay, a little bit more than that, About $1,000 each for a gift to those most creative ideas that we want. So they had better be darn good in order for you to win. Okay, now, basically I'm going to talk about innovativeness and creativity in science. Now, and what I'm going to do is, during this program, I've got a bunch of pictures that are here, and I want you to look at those pictures, and then I'm going to ask you, well, why is this creative? Okay, well, why is this creative?
Because.
This is from Kazakhstan, actually. There's a modern artist here. It's very impressive in terms of what he does. Or she, I don't know. Yes?
Just because.
Just because. Well, that's a great answer. Just because. Well, why are you happy? Just because. Why am I in love with Jan? Just because. There's got to be a little bit more explanation than that. What does this
Because
tell you?
nobody thought about the helmet in this way before.
You're exactly right. The innovativeness is just he's looking at, that's the beauty of it, he's looking at this in a way that none of us, when I first saw it, I go, oh, I never thought of looking at it like that. So he came up with a creative idea, incredibly creative, looking at something a little bit differently than I'd have ever done. And to me, that's part of the essence of creativity. A newness, a freshness, a way of looking at things. Okay, now what is creativity? The problem with creativity is that we know it when we see it, but it is hard to define. That's the definition of it. As I said yesterday, that's exactly the same thing with pornography. You don't know it until you see it. Creativity, you don't know it until you see it. And why is this important? What do you think of this picture?
Connection with space.
Yeah, it's basically connection with the space, connection with knowledge, connection with basically much of our intellectual being. And again, people will interpret this in many ways, in many different ways. But I like the feel of that. That hey, yeah, that's kind of interesting. Okay, now creative stuff from Kazakhstan. Now, these are totally different things. But why are they creative? They're both creative.
Я первый справа нашел, да.
Why?
It looks light.
Looks like, yeah.
Because this is something very simple.
It's very simple, very elegant. What else?
These are
They what? Yeah, basically it's their vision. They're expressing themselves in a degree to which nobody else has. Now, when we're doing our science, this is what we want to do. We want to be able to view things differently as scientists, to express ourselves differently, to set ourselves apart from other scientists, and to ask the right questions. And the right questions are literally the questions that have never been asked. And how do you get at those in terms of the creativity to find those? And this is by Matisse. There's nothing more difficult for a truly creative painter than to paint a rose. Because before he can do so, he has to first forget all the roses that were ever painted. What does that mean?
fresh look.
You have, basically, creativity is a fresh look. If you're creating a picture of a rose that's already been there, well, that's not very creative. So Matisse would paint pictures that are new, but looking at an old object. And that's part of the essence of epidemiology and science. We're dealing with a lot of old stuff, but we have to now look at these with new eyes, with a new perception. That's what Matisse did, and that's what many of the famous painters did. You know, the dangers at looking at creativity like we're doing now, there are many myths that grow up around great inventions. So that basically I can tell you how I set up with Jan and Tom this multinational study of diabetes. Well, you embellish the story a little bit, you change things a little bit. So it's really not getting a handle on the process itself. It's describing the process, but anytime we try to reproduce this or describe it, it is going to be a little bit different. Second, the significance of inventions is not realized until much later. Well, you see the most famous inventors and the most famous artists are not picked up until like 20, 30, 40 years later, and basically until they're recognized. Some are recognized now, but most are not until later. And basically, the stories on creativity, by definition, they have to be told in retrospect. I mean, I can't tell you about the Pasteur's studies before he does those, and how he created and how he had the mind to do it. But that's the only way to get a good handle on what's going on in his story. So the most creative acts are rather mundane. It's like basically they're very simple, but all of a sudden there was a quote by Bernowski about Einstein, and he said that Einstein was a man who would ask very simple questions, but would have devastating results. And that's what you want to do, is have real simple questions, but really change things and turn people's eyes around. And like what Diane had presented, the article by Omron, the first time I read that article, there's only 3 articles in my whole life. I've read thousands and thousands and thousands of articles. There's only 3 articles in my whole life that I read, and Omron's article was one of them, that my whole world changed. Because the world was different and looked to me totally different. And some of the artists, that's what they do. And this will be talking more about what Edison said, that invention is 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. Creativity and innovation takes a lot of time and takes a lot of effort, and can be very, 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 very discouraging because people just won't see what you're talking about. And maybe they won't even see what you're talking about in your lifetime, but then you have their effect. And I love these things, these two. Creativity requires the courage to let go of certainties. Every act of creation, first an act of destruction, by Picasso. What do you think about this, the picture to the right? Now, not too many people think of tattoos as, oh my God, body art. When I saw this, I go, man, that's really cool. That's really creative. I don't think I'd want that on my back, but isn't it cool? Basically showing the flights of the birds from the leaves. It's very impressive. Very, very, very creative. So creativity can permeate everything that you're doing. It can permeate even the tattoos that you have. And when we're thinking about science, you can think about this many, many different levels. For example, you can think about this even when you're analyzing your data. There's creative ways that you can look at your data. So it permeates all of the systems of science, all of the systems of research. Each point can be creative at a time. But often what will happen is you just do rote, whereas you can in fact do something that's very different. Okay, now, why is invention incremental? How can a creative idea come about? First of all, it must be related to existing ideas. You have to have in your mind certain ideas, certain data, certain facts that you can use. And this information then you pull together in a different way, looking at it in a different way. A lot of people who are straightforward epidemiological researchers will just continue to do things same old, but how do we break away from that? How do we look at things a little bit differently? How do we present them, for example, in health promotion in terms of different ways that we can reach people that are novel? How can this be implemented? What does it mean for an idea to be ahead of its time? A creative idea must be comprehensible to others. So if you have an idea, the best ideas that are simple ideas that everybody can understand. So you might be able to develop your own creative idea in your own field, a small area, but basically it will have its biggest effect as if it can be sent out to other people in all different fields. What good is an invention that nobody wants? And often when we do science, often people don't notice the importance of what we do for years or even decades in the future. They basically suggest that some existing ideas may constrain creativity. We are all involved with our silos. We're all involved with our, not only silos, but basically our ways of looking at things that we've been taught. And basically the need for breaking away from that and looking at things from different areas. Now, if we're looking at inventions, it's very interesting how things evolve. And basically, the same way in our field of epidemiology, is that when we're starting to evolve, is that we start to use the paradigms and the tools that we've had in the past and start to bring those forward. It's not until they're brought forward enough that we start to use these in different ways and use these in terms of different hypotheses. So, for example, the stagecoach in the United States evolved, and immediately after the stagecoach evolved is that the railroads evolved too. Now, tell me what your animal looks like. If somebody could tell me what your animal looks like. What?
Purple.
Purple? Okay, purple animal. What else? How many feet?
16.
72. No. Well, the reason for this exercise is that when you think of an animal that doesn't exist, guess what? It has almost all the characteristics of animals. So if you really were thinking about an animal that didn't exist, you start to think about an animal with, 17 legs, basically a nose on its rear end, or something really different. But we're constrained on how we think about new things by what we know about things in the past. And the people who are most successful are the people who can move away from those constraints. But it's very, very difficult to do. I think it's really cool. You can never solve a problem on the level on which it was created. Now, isn't that fantastic? This is also in Kazakhstan. It's really cool.
Where did you find them?
on the web, geez. Yeah, and I just think that's really, really incredible. Why is that cool? Why is that creative?
It's surprise.
There's a surprise element there, like, oh, wow, oh. It grabs your attention because you don't expect that. What else?
Marketing.
Oh, great marketing. This did, in fact, I did take this from a marketing group. Because basically, I don't know what they're marketing, but this is a great ad on television or something like that. And what else?
It's known, seems unknown.
Yeah, it's like, if you look at good art, if you look at good creativity, it's putting together elements that you never thought about being together. Now, why would you ever put as hair a plant? But if you look at the total picture, it fits. I mean, this is really crazy, but it fits. So that's what you have to do in science too, is put together elements that don't really fit, and then all of a sudden, hey, yeah, it looks like they fit pretty good. This is very interesting. Okay, these for examples, this is getting back to the issue of thinking of an animal that doesn't exist. Well, people select common concepts as examples, and they use specific items, and so when they're creating novel, intelligent beings, blah, 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 they look an awful lot like human beings. And it's because of our conceptualization of what is a human being. These are not human beings, but they look an awful lot like human beings. So again, once again, it's on its way to pure creativity, but it's basically using elements of our common conceptions. Okay, what makes people more creative? A paradox. People access categorize when being creative. Categories are retrieved on the basis of cues during the creative process. The more cues available, the more access, more specific situations lead to less creativity. So what this is saying is when I'm being creative or when you're being creative, you have to be working with something in your mind. But if all of a sudden you have this whole pattern in your mind, and you're looking at this pattern, well, it's tough to break away from that pattern into something new. So there's this delicate balance between the information that you're using and working with and basically being able to change those elements to be creative. And that's, again, exactly what happens in science in trying to answer things. If you have all the data available, if you have all the analyses already done, there's not much you can do from there. Now, who is this? This is Andy Warhol, and I suspect that many of you don't know that Andy Warhol is from Pittsburgh. Not bad. This guy is a wild man. I mean, basically, if you looked at Andy Warhol's art. Now, Andy Warhol, when I mentioned this, many of you don't know about this, Andy Warhol, one of his most famous pictures was a can of tomato soup. How many have ever seen this? Okay, a few of you have. This is great. Well, you can basically, I'm sure when I said that to people, you can visualize it. I mean, it's right there in your mind. And so Andy Warhol was incredibly good at creating a very simple image and basically marketing that image and selling that image all over the world. And he did a fantastic job of that. Okay, social factors. Creativity is fostered by an environment. Creativity must be valued by community. I've been working with some of the people here in Kazakhstan because one of the major programs here is the building of innovation. And they're trying to move your country into basically being more entrepreneurial, more innovative. Well, we have that in the United States, for example, in Silicon Valley. We're basically incredible creativity on a daily basis. And it's difficult to move into a society like that. And I think what's going to be happening here, and so what you need, and what we have, for example, in Silicon Valley, is all these entrepreneurs together, all these scientists together, all these engineers together, bouncing ideas off of each other. Like a Brownian motion of ideas. Bang, 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 bang. And then basically so group creativity. What do you think of group creativity? So you're working in a group. How creative do you think a group is?
Collection of ideas.
You can get a collection of ideas, right? Exactly right. So you do generate ideas in a group.
Chain reaction.
The problem is we respond to each other's reactions. So one might feel too shy or too crazy.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what happens. Is basically there's a risk and benefit of group work. And the benefit is that you will in fact generate more ideas. But at the same time, you get in a group 1 or 2, 3 people who dominate. So it's their ideas that dominates all things. And often what will happen in a group is that the person who has the most creative idea is also the wildest idea, I mean, just totally off the wall idea, that if they present that idea to the group goes, that's crazy, it makes no sense. So you have a balance act. Most of the major creative events that have occurred are done by individuals. I mean, groups are very important, but individuals are very important because basically, whenever I think of a creative idea, or whenever you will think of a creative idea, you'll start to think, no, this, geez, I don't know, this doesn't really make sense. You don't want, basically, your idea can get killed within a half hour if someone says, I don't think that's a very good idea. But if you can sit on it and think on it over and over and over, you come up with the ideas of how to do it. Okay, now there's some evidence in terms of the traits identified in creative people. The ability to find appropriate problems. So basically, the basic issue of creativity is that you have to be successful in finding appropriate problems. And then you can work on those problems. The second is the ability to defer judgment. So what you see is the paradigm out there, the research that's being done out there, and you say, okay, that's fine. But you can also think about it and make changes and think about how that can approach. And this is very important for creativity or inventors, is that failure you don't conform to social pressure. If your boss says, your idea is stupid, your idea is bad, what you see in what I've seen in academia and what I've seen in industry, people go do it themselves and say, okay, I'm going to do it myself. And they have enough courage and faith in their idea to actually go do it. And tolerance of ambiguity. In the world of creativity, nothing is positive or negative. Everything is ambiguous, and you have to be able to survive in that type of environment. And basically, a deep commitment, what I've seen in terms of most successful innovators and most successful creative people, is that they really want to stay in that domain, work in that domain, and they may work years in order to get their program going. Now, okay, creativity is the ability to see relationships where none existed. And that's what I was trying to have for you, to have you think about, think of an idea, a hypothesis that never been thought about. It's difficult to do. Second, the enemy chief of creativity is good sense. I love Picasso when he said that. So that basically, what does that mean? The chief enemy of creativity is good sense. Basically, if you look at the world, basically the line between insanity and creativity is a very thin line. People go back and forth and back and forth. And basically, those who are insane are typically creative people. And so what you see. Now, what about this picture? Why is this creative?
It makes your mind draw relations between the colors, for example. The mirror, if you mirror the fingers, there's 5th, 4th, and 3rd, they're same colors.
And I find it a huge invention because you can imagine that kid just going all around the house just this painter. Now I love this. Now this is really creative, isn't it? What do you think of that picture?
This guy left-handed.
Yeah, he still has a left hand.
Crazy.
So this is a clear, wonderful picture because it has certain examples. One is, this is crazy. You think, oh my God, you said to think about your hand being cut off. And then the other thing is that, it really makes sense. Chop, 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 chop. So basically, this is an idea that and it's some of the craziest ideas and most creative ideas are really on the edge of good taste. And a lot of them go into bad taste. And this is pretty bad taste, but I love it. Okay, this is also from Kazakhstan, from basically from ancient times. It's fantastic. It's beautiful. Basically, everything flows together, and having the picture of the lady behind it looking at that, and that's a very, very, very creative picture. Okay, the environments for creativity is that you need good working conditions, but the environment is more generally important. So it doesn't matter if you're working in a university or you're working in industry. It's really the environment and who you're bouncing ideas off and having access equipment. Okay, now the three main forces are the creative individual, like you, as creative individuals in science. The second is the social field that determines that new ideas are worth retaining. And that's what we have in Silicon Valley, is that the good ideas, they get money. And bang, 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 bang. And that's what we've been talking here with your government, to get the good ideas, to get money, to basically build a knowledge society like we have in Silicon Valley. And a stable cultural demand that preserves the ideas selected by the field. So once you create a good idea, it's got to be maintained and nurtured over time. Once you develop a good idea in the area of science, how can it continue and how will that influence additional science? And this is, creativity is more than just being different. Anybody can be weird. That's easy. What's hard is to be as simple as Bob, making it simple, awesomely simple, and that's creative. Well, who is this? Yes. Jordan. I mean, you talk about elegance and beauty and creativity, what we do on a basketball court. But how can a basketball court be creative? It can't. Anything can be creative. And again, if he could do this in, well, of course, I'm not 7 foot tall. If he could do this in basketball, well, we can do this in our fields and start to bring out in different areas. Now, the social cultural is like by natural selection and theory of evolution. So basically, the ideas will replace better ideas will replace good ideas, and that's what we want to see in creativity: the creation of better and better ideas, and those ideas will destroy the previous ideas. And then, in terms of our science, that will destroy the previous theorems, and so we can move on. The problem finding is important. Problem finding produces more and more extreme variation of current norms for the field to operate on. So if you want to be creative, if you want to develop science, go in an area that is going to be needed. And it's difficult to decide what that is, but basically it's an area that you feel comfortable about, that you can generate ideas about, that you can publish in, and that's basically the form of how you as a person can ask the important questions. And basically, it's really, as Albert Einstein said, is that imagination is more important than knowledge. What does that mean? Yes.
Somebody could read a lot of books and really be so knowledgeable, but I think what he's referring to is somebody's ability to think critically, come up with, and analyze and ask questions.
It's basically, what he's saying is exactly right. That basically, he can read and read and read and read and read and read and gather more and more and more knowledge, but the person who's creative can basically take something from up here, or something from here, and something from here, and create a whole new image as to what's going on. So it's basically, as you're reading your journals and reading your work, basically you should sit back and think, well, why is this important? What would be the next step? What is creative? What can I do creative in this area? Yeah, I like this one. Isn't that cool? Bowden's impossibility theory suggested that an idea is creative if that person could not have had the idea before. The could not is defined in terms of what the person's mental representations and processes allow. So basically, it's saying here that your mental representation will help you, and how you see the world will help you be creative. You have to try to be creative. What do you think of this? Now, isn't it fantastic? I just keep thinking about this as I looked at this over and over and over. Isn't it fantastic that You think how difficult it is to be creative. Well, think about how difficult it is to be creative about a bathtub. Jeez, I mean, you got worlds ahead of you, but a bathtub, like, geez, and that's incredibly creative, isn't it? Okay, creativity across domains. Creativity is a gift, a way of seeing the world. The different types of people are creative, and creatives are unconventional, showing total commitment to their craft. So that basically they go down a different highway. And basically, if you're looking at the characteristics of creative people, they tend to be self-confident, alert, unconventional, hardworking, and obsessive people. Now, what do you think of this ad? Why is this creative? And the color. I mean, the color contrast is fantastic. I mean, basically, if you look at it, it draws your eye right up above. And bang! And that basically brings you in the whole picture of her face. And it's really incredible. What else?
And her face like a mirror.
Yeah, look at her face. And basically, her face is basically almost, it's like a plain face. And it's also not only a plain face, she looks almost like a male, too. So you look at it, oh, geez, and that kind of gets you a little bit uncomfortable. Geez. And what else?
What is this? Alcohol or?
Perfume?
Well, I also put this in here, too, is that I've had this once or twice. It's very good. So if you want, this isn't an ad for it, but it is pretty good stuff. Now, isn't this great? I love this. This is from Kazakhstan, too. Creativity and problem solving can be taught. And basically, if we foster our young people, and that's what I'm trying to do this for you, is I can't teach you creativity, but I can teach you how to think about creativity. Motivation and creativity are related. Convention and upbringing inhibit originality. And creativity is the act of an individual. So it's you who are creative. It's you who are creative. There's very little joint creativity. It's basically 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now what really makes an invention is that someone decides not to change the solution to a known problem, but to change the question. And that's why I constantly emphasize to you, the question is the key. You got it, the question drives everything, and if you have a great question, and if you have great creativity, you can work and put that together, and that's the future. So work on the creativity with regards to the question. Okay, now what Einstein said is to raise new questions, new possibilities, to regard old problems from a new angle requires creative imagination and marks real advances in science. And from my field of epidemiology, this was an old paper, but it's really the only paper that's written there. Our problem in epidemiology, our problem is how to enhance the productivity of creative works in our field. Because for the most part, epidemiology isn't very creative. And so what we need to do is push this further. Okay, now, Chu said, we feel that we have an advantage over some groups because we're not confined to conventional thinking. We think wildly. And that's what you need to try to do, is get you start to think wildly, get your students start to think wildly, and then move that into the future. And the critical need for being exposed to new ideas, currents of thought, and new methods. Now, science in general is risk averse, and when you're doing work in your university, the epidemiology tends to try to avoid any risks. So basically, this is low risk, low gain research. It's very common. We all do it. I say on my 500 papers, about 480 of them are low risk, low gain research, but then there's 20 papers of mine that are bang. I mean, they were really creative. Those are my favorite papers. Now, this is basically something extremely important. That where we're looking at now is that basically, in terms of we're all in our little silos. Ding, 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 and basically here we are in epidemiology. Tom is there, Jen is there, Fine is there. We're all in our little silos. And computer science. But the way we're going to be most successful is to cut across disciplines. And I was very impressed that we had a physicist here, and that's really cool. Basically, to have somebody from outside the field coming in and basically saying, hey, and like I know physics, I don't know physics at all, but having people to be able to interact with that are from different disciplines, that's what moves the field forward. Or else we just continue to talk to people we know and what they know. And what we're seeing, for example, I do a lot of work, I've been doing a lot of work in the area of disasters. And basically at the time of a disaster, and basically Kazakhstan is a very good place for disasters because there's going to be, I don't want to say this, but there's going to be a big earthquake sometime in the future, maybe 10 years, 20, 30, 40 years, but there will be. But like in an earthquake, for example, a friend of mine is the major earthquake person in the world, and he said, well, you know, in an earthquake, what we need is about 10 physicians. 10 physicians. Yeah, we need about 20 nurses, 10 social workers. We need 25 businessmen. We need 5 lawyers. So basically, all multidisciplinary. If you think of the way a disaster is, you can't. If we all talk, if all of us, if we take 50 of us as epidemiologists there, we can't do anything. So we have to interact. And the other component of this is that it doesn't do us any good to, again, stay in our silo of our university. And this is one of the main reasons we came here, is that basically we should be able to communicate and do collaborative research across our institutions. Okay, now this is the most important thing in this whole talk. Failure is good. Failure is good. Success, failure. Get up, move, try, fail, risk it all again. Creativity is inventing, experimenting, growing, taking risks, breaking rules, making mistakes, and having fun. The secret of life is to fail 7 times and to get up 8 times. You see things and you say why, but I dream things that never work and say why not? So basically, what do I mean by the issue is failure is good? You learn. Basically, you fail, you learn. There's no question about it. That's one of the beauties of failure. What else?
Action is better than inaction.
Well, action is better than inaction. I agree. What else? Why do I say that failure is good?
Makes your mind.
Basically, it prevents you from making more mistakes.
Makes your mind.
What?
It's keeping you interested in what you read.
Yeah, that's right. Basically, if you look at Thomas Edison and the electric light bulb, he failed about 9,999 times. And then he hit it. Boom. So the basic logic, and this is the way that the entrepreneurs and the experts in Silicon Valley works, they go, well, you can't make $1 million or $1 billion unless you fail. I mean, everybody fails. And the basic issue is my philosophy too, and it's something that you need to think about, is you got to have enough guts in what you believe. That's first of all. And secondly, in terms of having enough guts, I always look at things, because I always try. I've failed many, many times, and I'm very proud of it. I've failed many, many times, and basically I always look at things and say, well, you know, I could do this, or I don't have to do it, but what's the worst possible thing that can happen when you fail? And usually when you look at that, nothing. I mean, just trivial, who cares? So that basically, it's better to try than to not try. And basically, and the realization is you are going to fail, but who cares? I mean, no one's going to remember that. Okay, now what I want you to do is you got 10 minutes, and I want you to write down a fantastic, an incredible, creative hypothesis. And then tomorrow what we're going to do, as I said, is we're going to get those printed out for you. We're going to judge that on a peer review. And Jan and Tom and I have brought to you, I think it's a Mercedes, Jan, isn't it, the first prize? Oh, yeah. Okay, you got 10 minutes. And then, yeah, basically just put your